Hello, hello, and welcome to Live Free, Own Your Mind workshop hosted by Eden Lifestyle and presented by me, your coach, Shell Clark. My name is Shell, and I am a certified holistic lifestyle coach. I've got 15 years of combined experience in leadership, business, coaching, customer service. I'm a certified John Maxwell speaker and a dog mom to a 6-month-old pup that I absolutely love and adore. And my story brings us here today, brings me here with you. So let me tell you a little bit about that. Now, lost, insecure, and unhappy is how I felt regularly many years ago. The weight of my failures and the stuck feeling I carried, I blamed on anything and everything outside of myself, mostly because I didn't know how and I lacked the confidence to own it all, meaning own all of my failures, all of my feelings, and my successes. That is until one day I had what you might call an awakening. It was at my lowest point, sitting alone in my studio apartment, tears streaming down my face because the stress was just too much. I was wrestling with the pain of hopelessness, trying to understand why this was happening and why to me. And then I remembered something a friend once told me. He said, "Shell, you have a negative attitude. Remember, wherever you go, there you are." Now, that's to say that no matter what happens outside of myself, such as what others think or say about me in society, my family, friends, the economy, whatever is happening, such as a pandemic, I will take my attitude with me wherever I go and into whatever I face. And in taking a hard look at myself, I realized, dang, he's right. And that was my answer to why this was happening. So at that moment, I knew I could change it, but I didn't know how yet. So becoming aware of where I was standing currently in that moment in time and owning that I put myself there was vital to my transformation over the next decade. And over that time, I incrementally became more empowered as what I like to call a steward of myself. And that's what I now inspire in others. You see, my way of thinking improved, and as a result, so did my life experience. I changed for the better. And I currently feel more joy and peace because I am unstuck. I am free and living what I call a legend. Now, my hope is that you too will choose to allow yourself the freedom to live your legend. Now, today I'm sharing the 5 steps I learned on how to live free and own your mind, so you can have more joy, more peace, and more goodness more often. All right, before moving on, please take 1 minute now to think and then journal the answer to this question. So friends, if you do not have a pen, pencil, or journal, pause this video right now. Go ahead, jump on over there, grab that. I will wait. Assuming that you now have those things, I want you to consider the question, what is the one thing you want to get from this workshop? One thing. You're probably going to learn a few, but what would be the one thing that you want most to get out of the time that you're spending with me here today during this workshop? Go ahead and take a moment, pause the video, write this down in your write this down in your journal, and we'll continue. Okay, so I have another question for you. How many of us have ever felt so stuck in a way of thinking, feeling, or being that we truly can't see any other options? Please tell me in the comments below how you relate to that by giving me a quick backstory. Let me know what was one major roadblock to feeling and being free for you. Because for me, I discovered that it was believing I wasn't. Does that make sense? So I'm going to say that again. I came to understand in my own experience that one major roadblock to feeling and being free is believing that we aren't. One can have no smaller or greater mastery than mastery of oneself. Now, this is important. Take a moment here. What does mastery of self mean to you? Again, please pause the video for 1 minute, just 1 minute. Take some time to really think about, what does the mastery of self mean to you? Write it in your journal and feel free to comment below. Now, before we talk about mastery, I want to remind you, words, when we break it down and we think about really what is a word, it's a symbol of something, is it not? Yes, it's language, but it's a symbol of something. You could think of it as usually a symbol of some sort of feeling that we want to have, right? So in this case, when we're talking about mastery, we're talking about having a sense of control, or truly having control over something. Now, for the purposes of this workshop, we are talking about ourselves, not other people. So how many of you have ever felt stuck or lost? Because I'm sure I am not the only one. Let me know, have you ever felt stuck or lost in your life? Have you noticed that that feeling was directly related to thinking we didn't have control, or we had lost some sort of connection? Maybe lost understanding or being understood. Again, I believe that can boil down to stating that we feel like we've lost something, like connection, and thinking that we didn't have control. Now, the reality is that we don't have control over things like the weather, what people will say, think, feel, or do, but we can certainly have control over what we do, what we say, and yes, the thoughts we choose to focus on. Okay, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. If we want to feel more freedom, we must practice what I like to call mastery over ourselves, and in particular, our mind. Now, if the word mastery doesn't feel right to you, it kind of gives you an icky feeling, if you will, go ahead and replace that with something like it, okay? What we're really talking about here when I'm using the word mastery over ourselves is controlling ourselves, having control of our mind. And this begins firstly with awareness of self. So this is one of the first steps in the 5 that I'll be sharing with you. Now, the problem that often arises for us here is that we might feel it's too scary or shameful to truly look at ourselves. But I ask you, is that really truth? Is that the truth? I mean, fear will cause us to hold back, to be stuck, right? So then calling up courage will break this cycle so that we can have true awareness of self. Something to note in your journal here is that note that clarity gives confidence. Clarity gives confidence. Let's get clear now. And I'd like you to take a moment here after I read this question to you. Again, take 1 minute to do this exercise. You want to think about it and then write it down. Don't think too long. That's why we only give you 1 minute. All right. So what's the one thing you want most to change right now? Again, what's the one thing you want most to change right now? Go ahead and pause this video. All right, welcome back. Now, with that written down, now that you know what you want to change most, we need to talk about why. Okay, so now we know what we want. We want to clearly define why we want it. You probably heard a lot about why, know your why. And that's important because why really is about motivation, okay? Why, getting clear on our why is really getting clear on what is motivating us to do the thing so that when times get tough, because they will, we will come across, we will come across roadblocks in the future while we're on our journey to achieve whatever it is we're looking to achieve. So just keep that in mind. We need to know what our motivation is behind the thing. So when things get tough, we keep going. Okay, so my coaching tip for you here is to dive 7 levels deep into this one. we're not going to do this exercise in this workshop here today. If this is something you would like more help on, as always, I'll give you my contact information at the end of this workshop. Feel free to reach out. Okay, so dive 7 levels deep. And what I'm talking about here is we want to ask ourselves, the reason why we want to dive into why is because usually our first answers are vague and superficial. So that's why we want to go deep. We want to keep peeling off the layers of that onion, so to speak, so that we can get to the heart of why by asking why. So we ask why, then we give ourselves an answer, and then we ask ourselves, well, why did I answer that way? Okay. And then you want to continue on going that way, so on and so forth, 7 levels deep. You might be surprised what you find out. After you've done that, we want to go into the roadblocks. So all of this are the steps to really becoming fully aware of the self, right? So we want to know what we want to get, we want to know what we want. We want to clearly define why we want it. And we want to identify potential roadblocks. Now, one of our greatest roadblocks is not the past, but it's the bully of a voice that tends to live in our minds. You probably have heard this term. It's called the inner critic. That's that voice that comes up and tells us all kinds of nasty things. Like, as an example would be, we're not good enough, we'll never make it. And oftentimes that voice is speaking from fear, and usually as a result of failures or pain we've experienced in the past, right? Because our brain is trying to protect us to some capacity. It doesn't want us to feel that. We're going to talk more about that coming up. So just keep that in mind. One of the roadblocks that we could face could be the inner critic. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're journaling what potential roadblocks you might have. Next, we want to recognize our strengths and wins. Okay, question. How many of us can recount all of our failures, pain, and trauma and fears easily, right? If I told you, what do you not want to experience again? Boom, you probably have 10 answers right off the top of your head. Now, if I asked you, to tell me about your wins or successes this week, how easy or hard would that be? This is also really important for you to know in your journal, because if we find it easier to recount our fears and talk about what we don't want, that tells us that we practiced a negative way of thinking because, well, it's become so easy. It's become second nature, if you will, right? It's easier at that point for us to do than to think or see what's good or possible. And to be honest, honoring my own wins is a practice I am constantly working on. I mean, when my boss would ask me to share my wins, I had a really hard time of it because I never stopped to see them. I was too busy doing and going and trying to be better that I never actually stopped, slowed down, and paid attention to my wins. Now, the other part of that is because I was too busy comparing myself. And that is what I'm going to ask you to be aware of. If you too have a hard time recognizing your successes and what's good in the world and in your life, no matter how big or small they are, it all matters greatly. So think of it like this. After all, 100 pennies adds up to $1, doesn't it? So then, to have awareness of our strengths and wins, we must not compare them to others. Okay, number 5, quick tip here for awareness of self is a strategy that can help us to better master ourselves relates to how we think about ourselves. I don't know about you, but I know that for me, a good strategy can always help us. Before we talk about that, let's do a quick exercise here. What do you believe about the words we say to ourselves? Now, what I mean by that is that words matter, and the words that matter most are the ones we say to ourselves. I mean, I'm sure many of us would agree with that. So I want to ask you, keep this in mind. Go ahead and pause this video. Think about, what do you believe about this quote? What do you believe about the words and how much they matter, the words we say to ourselves? Go ahead and take a moment, pause the video, jot that down. I'll meet you here in a moment. So let's find out. Let's do another self-evaluation. Now, this time, this is a two-part question. I really want you to think about, currently, in this last week, what thoughts did you focus on most? I want you to continue to play the video. Don't pause it this time. In the last week, what thoughts did you focus on most? Really think about when you woke up in the morning, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? What action did you take? What did you look at? Meaning, what did you listen to? What did you watch? Did you get on Facebook, on the news, weather, what? How did this affect your mood for that day? How did this mood you had affect your relationships? Whether with significant others, coworkers, or friends. Consider your habits here is the point I'm getting to. Consider your habits. How often do you go on social media? What music or types of movies or TV shows do you watch? Is there a show you're binge watching right now? I mean, we all have one, right? Have you ever stopped to think about, how does this show that you're watching in large doses affect your mood or your thoughts? Does the show uplift you, make you laugh? Does it scare you? Does it make you worry about the future? Think about that. If you need to, go ahead and pause now and jot down your thoughts in your journal. The point that I want to bring home to you here is that it's not only what happens to us that matters, but also what we think is happening that shapes our psychological well-being. So again, that's why I was asking you to consider not only what your most dominant thoughts were, but also how did you feel? Peter Kinderman, a lead researcher and head of the Institute of Psychology, Health, and Society, shared that in a study of 30,000 people who were constantly complaining about their lives, it was revealed that a steady mental diet was a prime predictor of today's most common mental health problems. It also shows that while there are a few factors that affect our well-being, traumatic life events are the primary reason we suffer from anxiety and depression. Now, how we cope and how we deal with stress and anxiety indicates the level at which we experience the anxiety. So I want to say that again. How we cope and how we deal with stress and anxiety indicates the level at which we experience the anxiety. So think again about how this steady diet of media, positive or negative, is affecting you deep down to your soul. Now, this self-evaluation is really designed to help us to be more aware of our tendencies, like I said, our habits, when it comes to our mental diet. So this is something I would recommend that you do often. This is something you can do at the end of every week, and then again monthly, and then maybe again quarterly. To start, keep it simple. If this is not something you're used to doing, I would say start with monthly if that's easier for you, and then definitely go into weekly, because having that weekly snapshot of your mental diet is going to be really helpful when it comes to becoming more aware of ourselves. Furthermore, how might that impact our inner critic, meaning our mental diet? Now, it has been said that our greater enemy lives within us. The critical inner voice is the language of this enemy. It is an internal dialogue that drives rumination, self-blame, and self-loathing. It mocks us, shames us, scares us, and lures us into self-limiting or self-destructive behavior. Go ahead and give a minute here. Give a minute to think and journal on this. How do you relate to this topic, this conversation about the inner critic and it being one of our greatest enemies? Go ahead and pause the video. Now, it can be said that our greatest battle is the real us versus our inner critic, if you will. This critic can affect our mood in very subtle ways. It's sneaky, and our mood affects others. Now, science today, especially from the HeartMath Institute, proves that. This means we have a responsibility to be stewards of our minds and emotions. How we think and feel impacts the world around us. So I encourage us all to consider adopting a zero tolerance policy for your critic or self-destructive thoughts. All right, now let's get into my favorite part, the science behind thoughts. Thought formation is the first topic here. Neuroscience shows that our brain is made of neurons. Neurons communicate to the body with electrical impulses through the neurotransmitters released. Essentially what I'm saying is that there's some really cool stuff that happens in the brain which leads to thought formation. Now, it repeats. According to the National Science Foundation, an average person has about 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day, and of those, 80% are negative and 95% are repetitive thoughts. So, each time we repeat a thought, that neural pathway that those neurotransmitters run through become hardwired. So this eventually becomes a habit, and oftentimes that's how we tend to feel like our response or reaction or the thought that we have is natural or automatic. It's because we've practiced that way of thinking for so long, it's now become a subconscious habit. And again, so this is a learned behavior pattern that can change. So remember that monitoring our thoughts and attitude can change the firing and wiring of those neurons, which leads to a change in our behavior. And nutrition for our brain also impacts our thoughts because everything in our body is connected. So feeding our brain the nutrients it needs is also important. However, for this workshop, we're going to focus on monitoring the thoughts and not the nutrition aspect. Now, on that note, let's dive into that strategy I promised you. Dr. Siegel, a clinical professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine and the founding co-director of the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA, created what he calls the Cole attitude. And I'm sharing this with you because it's to help us to become more aware of ourselves. And remember, greater awareness increases our sense of personal security. Let's break down Cole. So C, curious. This represents a desire to know or to learn. O, open, allowance to new views or ideas, basically saying, hey, there could be all kinds of greater ideas and opportunities for us that we need to be open to exploring. A, accepting, to believe or recognize. And L, loving, to feel affection, to enjoy. Now go ahead and take 1 minute here, pause the video to journal, and if you'd like, comment below about how you might use this method to help you practice monitoring your thoughts. All right, so the next step, which is step number 2 of the 5, is to resolve. Let's dive into an exercise here. Go ahead and pause the video for just 1 minute. Think about and journal, what does resolve mean to you? To resolve means to make a firm determination to do something. So I'd like you to go ahead and pull out your journal again. Take a moment, write this specific question in your journal for you to reflect on later after the workshop. And that is, how will you live it? How will you be it daily? be that change? And what I mean by that question is how will you, it refers to your resolve in the change that you listed earlier. How are you going to live that change? So when you resolve to do something, it's important to consider, well, what is that going to look like, right? How am I going to carry out that resolve day to day? Because change, true lasting change, happens over time, right? Okay, going into our third step, which is curious, to be curious. Gotta stay curious. And that is, what I'm saying here is to keep learning, keep discovering. Again, let's go ahead and go into an exercise. What would staying open to what's possible for you look like? Go ahead and pause the video. Think about, what would staying open to what's possible for you look like? All right, so a few quick tips here for you is flexible and realistically optimistic. Okay, this is something that I discovered in my journey because, I didn't like the idea of being fake about stuff. And I felt like positivity and optimism a few years ago sort of got a bad rap. I heard a lot of not so nice things from people who felt like that was being fake, like they were being fake, right? And I could definitely understand both points of view. In fact, I definitely didn't want to be that. I didn't want to feel that, to feel like I was being fake, right? So after some long thought and meditation, I developed what I call realistically optimistic, which basically means being very truthful, candidly truthful. It means recognizing how we currently feel in the moment, being honest and truthful about that. And that also could encompass how we're thinking about the person, place, or thing, about ourselves. But then we're going to make a conscious decision to refocus our mind on what we want or what we imagine could be the best case scenario. So that's where optimistic thinking or optimistic attitude comes into play here. Remember that we can only control ourselves. Although we do have the power to influence others, we can't control the outcome. We can't control others. And honestly, that is a good thing. Life tends to be more exciting when it's open to possibility and exploration and things that we just don't know, right? So I'm asking you here to please remain optimistic about you. And that is to say, remain hopeful and explore all good possibilities for you, and to think about you in that way, about yourself in that way. Because you know what, you will get through whatever hard challenges you're facing or will be facing. You're going to feel better. I totally believe that, and I have faith. Okay, now let's move into number 4 of the 5 steps, which is discovery. Now, when we make decisions and act from fear rather than our values, we often experience more fear, more insecurity, more hopelessness. So I'm going to ask you to focus instead on what we really value and give the world the experience of you based on values. Create your goals based on what you value and identify why it all matters to you. You're going to hear me say that again. Okay, so create your goals, and then also, first create your values, your personal values, create your goals based on that, and then get clear about why all of that matters. Okay. Now, this is what I consider a major part of living a legend, so that when it's our time to pass on and we're no longer here on this earth, as we're going through that process of transition, we can feel confident about how we lived, how we showed up in the world, and how we, the kind of influence that we had on other people and the world. So again, it is important to know ourselves, starting with what we truly value, then creating what we call value-based goals. Okay, so the last and final step in this 5-step process is action, right? It's action. We got to do something with all of this because, look, awareness, resolve, curiosity, and discovery won't get us the freedom we seek until we act. Let's go ahead and do one more exercise. We're going to take 1 minute here. And I'd like you to think and then journal about what is the one thing you can do today that will take you towards the change you want. Before you pause, I will say this. There could be many different steps that you could take, okay? But I'm going to ask you to not worry about all the other things. Just pick one. What's the one thing that pops out to you that you feel most drawn to? Okay, the thing that you might feel most passionate about. And I want you to go and pause the video, write that down. Okay, awesome. Now, I've got some quick tips here to cover with you because often we want to rush the change, and I encourage you to slow down, to find a way to really enjoy the process and to put more focus on the journey rather than the destination. You will get there. So enjoy the time you spend becoming the person you need to be in order to have the outcome you seek. So one way, well, a few ways that we do this in the process of taking action is to focus on one step at a time. Okay? We want to make it easy to start with, especially if this is not something you feel really good, maybe not feel, words are hard, especially if this is something you don't feel confident in because maybe it's not a current practice. Just focus one step at a time and make it easy, something you can get, easily transition into, and then incrementally over time, whatever time period you choose, then you can increase the challenge. You can make it harder and harder as you go. But the idea is we want to build our confidence. And how we do that is we'll talk about through measuring and celebrating success in the moment. But one way that we do that is by becoming aware of those successes, of those wins, right? This again is why I say we must pay attention. We must bring awareness, conscious awareness to what we're doing that's really just knocking it out of the park, what we feel really great and proud of. Super important, building up our confidence so that when hard challenges hit us, because it will in life, we have the confidence built up. We have the sense of security in ourselves that we know we can get through it. And we're not just going to survive, but we're going to find a way to really thrive as a result of the challenges that we faced. Okay, so again, success leaves clues. So pay attention to all your success and celebrate those along the way. We also want to find a way to measure success. So coaching tip again here is in your journal, take a moment to really consider, well, how am I going to measure success? So one way to think of it is what does success mean to me? I had a mentor early on during my journey here, my experience, and through my story that I told you about. And she said something really phenomenal to me because I had a hard time at the beginning trying to figure out, well, how am I going to measure success on this? Because it's not like some of the goals I had were not quantifiable necessarily. And she said, I measure success for this year, the goals that I set forth, she says, through the amount of fun that I'm having. And that's how I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it that simple for right now. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. So have fun with how you decide you want to measure your success. Really enjoy the journey because yes, it does feel good to get to the destination, but that's also very short-lived, right? How many times have you gotten super excited about a trip or experiencing something or seeing somebody, and you're all excited, you get there, and then the time just flies. And before you know it, it's over, right? But if we can slow down and really enjoy that process of becoming, of the journey, all of it, you know, all of the successes, all the failures, all the challenges, all the ups, all the downs, all of it. If we can really just find a way to embrace all of that and, you know, find a way to use all of it as fuel to drive us forward into the next phase or the next step or the next day, then we're all the better for it. And it feels good. We have more joy, more fun along the way, right? Okay. So at the beginning of this workshop, I asked you to write down what was the one thing you wanted to get out of this workshop. And I truly hope that I was able to deliver to you at least the one thing you wanted from this workshop. Now, in the comments down below, please share with me what your greatest takeaway from today is. And I'd love to know, what are you going to do about it? Or what are you going to do with it, I should say. You guys are a great group, and I truly appreciate you very much. I would love for each and every one of you, if you found some value here and you really loved what we had going on in this workshop, I would love for you to join our VIP community by texting the number listed there on the screen. That's 1-805-953-7295. This is my mobile community, and they get VIP access to my monthly videos, training, and coaching tips. Going into the rest of the year, I'm always looking for new ways to add value, especially as we come into a new quarter or a new month. So it's definitely advantageous for you to be a part of that mobile community. And also, as a thank you for sharing your time with me here today, I would love for you to accept my gift. It's a 30-minute private consultation with me to take what you've learned here specifically in this workshop and apply it further into your life. Now, I offer this to you because I truly care deeply about each and every one of you feeling more free, owning your mind, and, you know, I care about how I can best support you to have more goodness from this life. So that's important. Excuse me. All right. So contact information here, mailing address, email, and then of course the booking link for that, 30-minute consultation is right there on the screen. I'll also have the link in the comment or in the description down below. Excuse me. I'm getting over a sinus infection, so forgive me here. For those that want more on this workshop here in particular, this topic anyway, I have a special playlist that I've curated on the Eden Lifestyle YouTube channel specifically made for this workshop. So that link will be down there as well. Now, if that's something you're into, I would encourage you to watch the video in that playlist called Change Your Mindset, Change the Game by Dr. Elia Crum. This is a fantastic, absolutely fantastic video. I love it. Of course, I love all the videos in that playlist, but this one in particular I find epic. So I hope you enjoy it as well. And friends, I look forward to meeting with all of you at some point. Thank you again so much for your time. You could have been doing anything else, and you chose to be here. So I honor you for that. Thank you very much. Much love.